The light on the touch here. So good evening and welcome everybody to the June 11th, 2026 City Council regular business meeting. Like us all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I will lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. Okay, I would entertain a motion for adoption. Oh, hang on a second. Let me check something here quickly before we go there. Let's see.
I think we were gonna drop 9B.
Yes. Okay. Hang on. Any little commiseration here and conference, making sure that we didn't miss something here. 9B. And colleagues, if I may, let's see, where are we? Hang on just a second. Councilmember Saunders is joining us for a short time and was requesting that the road, safety action plan. Oh, actually, we're going to get through pretty quickly. I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're okay. I'd entertain a motion for adoption with the change that you suggested.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the agenda with removing item 9B, draft letter to King County Metro for about proposed changes is not quite ready yet. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
That's it.
We have a quorum, so the ayes have it. I'm gonna.
They're online.
Yeah,
there are.
If our friends online can't hear us, can you hear us all?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Well, with that, we're moving on to public comments. The council will not be accepting online public comments. Comments are limited to a 3-minute time limit. This is an opportunity for the public to address the city council on any item within its purview or control. Oral public comments are only accepted in person to ensure the orderly conduct of the meeting. Speakers are limited to a 3-minute time limit. Council members may not respond during public comments, but may ask staff to follow up if appropriate. Staff always does. Public comments may not be used to promote or oppose candidates for public office or ballot measures. The mayor or presiding officer may interrupt comments that violate these instructions, are unrelated to the council purview or control over, or otherwise hinder the orderly conduct of the meeting. Big breath. Chief Zanella. Thank you, sir. I will say it is bittersweet, Diego, that Mike is not. Mike's been doing this for a very long time, but it's very good to see you, my friend. Thank you for doing this. And welcome to our friends Lolly Smith and Ann Sheely. Did I pronounce that correctly? The library advisory, is it Geely or Jig?
We say jiggly in Italy, it's Gili.
Geely, yeah, and library advisory committee. Welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Please.
I'm Ann Jiggly, obviously, because I just did the pronunciation, and this is
Lolly Smith.
And so we're going to share a little bit about what we've been doing with the library lately. Take it away.
We've selected the book for the Reads program for Shoreline and Lake Forest Park and Richmond Beach. And it's an amazing book. And I know I'm an English professor, but it's an amazing book and you could take my word for it. We're very excited for it. This is what it looks like. The library has plenty of copies. We've prepared to appreciate Heidi Baumeister, who comes from Port Townsend. So she's a local. That's an essential part of our selection. And I think you'll like it. It's the title No Two Persons comes from a line that most of us have thought about. Now, no two persons ever read the same book or saw the same picture. And so the story is about this book that this woman writes that we really don't know what it's about until the end. And then these people come in contact with the book and we hear their story. And there's a famous actor who turns to become a voice for audiobooks and trains himself. I learned about that. There's a woman who is I worried about this. She is, what is the word again?
Intimacy coordinator.
Intimacy coordinator for the movies. I had no idea what that was all about and it was fascinating. So Baumeister has really done a lot of research about these people, an artist in different places, and the book comes together absolutely wonderfully. So we've got some flyers for you and also some bookmarks for your reading dollies.
Great. Thank you so much.
She'll also be at Third Place Commons presenting to whoever shows up
Yay.
on the evening of August 11th, which is another requirement of our selection, is that the author come and provide their time for free, which is one of the reasons we always pick a local author.
Yeah.
Also, we will be the Library Advisory Committee and representatives of KCLS, King County Library System, will be at the Farmers Market this Sunday. The library people always come with swag of some sort, crayons and wallets and stickers. And we hand out a lot of information about summer reading programs for kids and for adults. There's an adult bingo. And it's always very well attended. We have a lot of kids and a lot of parents stop by. So if you're at the market this Sunday, come and see us.
Thank you so
And
much.
we give all of this to.
You can hand it up here with our clerk handles it, or we can handle it, or as you like. Thank you so much. While you're doing that, I'm gonna just check and see if there's anybody else who wants to make public comment. We're going to close public comment, and chair's privilege. I'm going to say this again. I am a product of the King County Library system. I grew up loving the programs as a kid. Absolutely. That was back when the library was on the back alley by the creek. And my daughter loves it, and it is a treasure. Thank you for what you.
Seconds.
Absolutely.
2-minute time has gone off or not. One of the things that we think about all the time as we interact with you, but we interact with the library, is how important it is to the community and how important it is that it's here in what is our town center. And with all of the change, I've lived in the neighborhood 38 years, since before my neighborhood was Lake Forest Park, when it was unincorporated King County. And as things change at the mall, we always want it to be first and foremost that somehow we make a place for the library and whatever happens here. That's my big pitch.
We're all committed to that. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your time. Okay, with that, where public comment is closed. Thank you again. Things like that is what makes our jobs a very positive thing, folks. And we're going to start with a proclamation recognizing June 19th as Juneteenth. Councilmember Goldman.
Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, setting in motion the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas the end of the Civil War began with the surrender of General Lee at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865, and ended with the final terms of surrender of the last Confederate general on June 2nd, 1865. And whereas this news reached Texas when Union Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston Bay with his troops, it was on June 19th, 1865 that he announced, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." And whereas celebration of the end of slavery reaching the furthest Union state, which became known as Juneteenth, is one of the oldest public celebrations of the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth celebrations spread across many southern states and more with the movement of freed Texan slaves as they exercised their newfound freedoms in search of family and new lives. And whereas the first Juneteenth celebration brought friends and families together, often on emancipated land, the first to be owned by former enslaved people, and included inspirational speakers, reading of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, food, and stories from former enslaved people. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates the complete emancipation of Confederate slaves, and June 19th was declared Emancipation Day in Texas in 1980. And whereas on a larger scale, celebration of Juneteenth reminds each of us of the precious promises of freedom, equality, and opportunity, which are at the core of America. Now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2026 as a day to celebrate Juneteenth in the city of Lake Forest Park.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Goldman. Next, we have recognizing June 22nd, 2026 as Octavia Butler Day. Deputy Mayor Fertoni.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to read this, and I dedicate this to Philippa Cassover, former council member who spearheaded the move to rename the street Octavia Butler Boulevard. Whereas Octavia Butler was a visionary and influential author whose groundbreaking work greatly contributed to the science fiction and speculative fiction genres, and whereas Octavia Butler was born on June 22nd, 1947 in Pasadena, California, and her literary contributions have captivated readers around the world, and whereas Octavia Butler became the first science fiction writer to receive the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship in 1995, acknowledging her exceptional talent and literary achievements, and whereas Octavia Butler's work explores important themes such as race, gender, power dynamics, and social justice, challenging readers to critically examine the world we live in, and whereas Octavia Butler's novels, including Kindred, Parable of the Sower, and Lilith's Brood, have garnered numerous awards and accolades, leaving an indelible mark on the literary landscape, and whereas Octavia Butler's profound influence extends beyond her written works, inspiring countless authors, artists, and readers to engage in meaningful conversations about the future of humanity and the importance of empathy and understanding, and whereas it is important to honor and celebrate the contributions of Octavia Butler, recognizing her significant impact on literature and the promotion of diverse voices within the genre. And whereas Octavia Butler resided in the city of Lake Forest Park, Washington, for a significant portion of her life, writing the book, her last novel, Fledgling here, drawing inspiration from the natural beauty and vibrant community of our city, and it is fitting to honor her connection to our community and this special day. Now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim June 22nd as Octavia Butler Day in our city and encourage all residents to take part in activities that celebrate her legacy. This day shall serve as a reminder of the transformative power of literature and the importance of embracing diverse perspectives in shaping a more inclusive and equitable society.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very important to recognize her. And as a side note, one of my theses was in science fiction. There you go. Many years ago. Moving on to recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Sheridan Beach community. Whereas the Sheridan Beach community traces its origins to the mid-1920s and is commemorating 100 years of neighborhood history, including the early development efforts that preceded the formal platting of the Sheridan Beach by the Puget Sound Mill Company. Whereas the Puget Mill Company later platted Sheridan Heights in 1930, further shaping the residential character of the area known as the Sheridan community. And whereas despite the stock market crash of 1929 and the economic hardships of the Great Depression, several concrete streets and sidewalks were laid in the Sheridan Beach and Sheridan Heights neighborhood. I think we have a picture of that someplace around here in City Hall, reflecting the early vision and planning of the area. Whereas the Great Depression slowed sales and construction for several years, but as the 1930s ended, the Sheridan Beach and Sheridan Heights developments began to grow gradually. And whereas following World War II, the Sheridan community experienced rapid growth as the population in the Pacific Northwest expanded and families sought homes in the Lake Washington area and Lake Forest Park, Washington area, whereas in 1938, the Sheridan Beach Community Club was formed and since has served as a valued gathering place for residents, helping foster neighborhood connection, recreation, volunteerism, and community spirit. And whereas the Sheridan area was annexed to the city of Lake Forest Park in 1994 and has remained as an important part of the city's history, identity, and community life. And Whereas the 100th anniversary of the plating of the Sheridan Beach provides an opportunity to honor the foresight of its early development, the resilience of the community through changing times, and the generations of residents who have contributed to its enduring character. Now, therefore, the mayor, the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim recognition of the 100th anniversary of the Sheridan Beach community and encourage Lake Forest Park residents to join in celebrating the history, growth, and lasting contributions of the Sheridan Beach community in Lake Forest Park. Signed this 11th day of 2026. And a quick side note, it is the 65th anniversary, roughly, of the Sheridan Beach swim team. With council's indulgence, was made aware of another, we didn't get a proclamation ready, but it's important to recognize that tomorrow is the, if I may, the adoption of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, that became the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. George Mason wrote it and was fundamental in making sure that that foundation was and the seeds were planted for the Declaration of the Bill of Rights in future times and part of the Constitution. So it's important for us to recognize these historical contexts and the contributions that people made and celebrate where we've come from, but also recognize how far we still have to go after 250 years. In a lighter note, tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Just saying. So moving on. Consent calendar. I'd entertain a motion for
You
adoption.
said that was a lighter note.
Well-
You're just reminding us of how old.
What's the quote from Ferris Bueller's? Somebody if you don't pay attention,
If you don't slow down, yeah.
don't slow down and pay attention to life, it'll pass you by.
It'll pass by,
Something
right,
to
yeah.
that effect. So I'm paraphrasing. Sorry, Matthew Broderick. We love you, man. Anyway, consent calendar. I'd entertain a motion for adoption.
I move the consent calendar.
I second.
Any questions, concerns, comments? Friends online, anything? It's adopted through unanimous consent. Thank you so much. Old business. We're moving on to Director Heaton is going to bring back Resolution 262075 Transportation Improvement Program, for the calendar years 2027 through 2032. This is our third presentation. Director Heaton, thank you so much. Do remember that the podium does go up and down. It doesn't drive around like Amy Poehler's and Saturday Night Live. But
Thank you.
Oh, it's perfect. Okay, what I passed out is the a couple of minor edits to the spreadsheet. So I wanted to make sure I used a little green pin to point arrows at those changes. One is on the first page, the others are on the second page. So I just want to make sure council saw I made some kind of last minute changes based on some of the feedback we had gotten. I do have a very brief PowerPoint.
There appear to be technical difficulties with the monitors at the moment.
it's all right.
That's all right. I'll just talk through the changes. The first change you see is actually on HS1. HS, of course, Healthy Streets. And I'm excited to tell you that we're working towards 26th Avenue between Forest Park Drive and Northeast 185th Street as our very first Healthy Street. And I'm meeting with the team, the community team on Tuesday to talk about that. And I'm pretty excited to get that moving. They have agreed to be my guinea pigs, if you will. And we're going to work through a lot of the application process, the agreements, the different things like that to really hopefully come up with a great plan that really works and is easy to administer. And then going down onto flipping to the second page, SPO3, this is the crosswalk improvements at 40th and 178th. You'll see that I've moved that up to next year, but only $200,000. So this is really key. I want to make sure that everyone understands. The full project potentially had drainage and a lot more work that needed to do. We have a project at 178th Street and Brookstart, CS05. This is the restripe to include bike lanes on this segment, and it includes that intersection right in there. So we've kind of bundled all those together. And we're looking at doing the restriping and then an RRFB at the intersection and a bit of a realignment of the intersection as well with a crosswalk. So we're very hopeful we can get that all done before the summer next year, right at the beginning of the season, the sort of the construction season. And kind of this is based on sort of shuffling priorities that we heard last minute, which is why they're a little bit after we put it out. Oh, look, it's up. Excellent. So basically what I have here is just a close up of the beginning of the TIP, 6-year TIP as it is shown. I didn't include a lot of the funding stuff because, mostly the funding is either local funds or it's up in the air. We have a lot of things that we're trying to look for some state funding on. We've got some leads on some TIB funding. TIB is very interested in that project I was just talking about on 178th, the restriping for bike lanes. And they're also very interested in the 37th sidewalks in front of LFP Elementary, which we've been dubbing the missing link because it's a missing sidewalk project. So all of those things are, next steps kind of. So this first portion just goes over the healthy streets, the pavement preservation, and then the ADA projects. And most of the ADA projects just sort of support the pavement preservation projects. Go ahead and, I'm supposed to go to the next one. We both did it. So then this next slide has the traffic calming projects on it. And you'll notice that Ballinger Way RRFB is on there. I know that's has been a big ask, and we've looked at that kind of at that same time. We were looking at the crossing at 187th and 40th. They looked at the possibility of doing this crossing as well. We also have the Briarcrest neighborhood, with a couple of streets in the Briarcrest neighborhood to kind of support traffic calming and getting kids to school, because there's a couple schools just outside of our city over there. And then also the Perkins corridor study. So this is really important for us to start Perkins with a study and really figure out what the right plan is out there. I definitely have ideas that I'll be talking to whoever does our study about. And I will definitely be pulling in the biking and the ped community as well as the community that lives out there to talk about what the right option is. But I think it's really important we just start that because it's such a complicated project. The next ones you're going to see in blue there are the local road safety plan. Oh, I didn't rename it here. Formerly known as the local road safety plan, but I renamed them as SP for safety plan because now it's the road safety action plan. So that I changed the name partway through. Anyhow, you will see a safety project right there at 104 and 178. That intersection needs some safety improvements. This is a temp project because our long-term plan for the SR4 corridor, which is on the next page, is a complete streets project from the roundabout all the way down to the intersection to bring people from the roundabout location all the way down, being able to bike and walk in our community through there. So we're pretty excited about that. But it's out a ways because we know that's going to take time. We've got to get the state on board. We've got to get approvals. We got to get design done. And then we got to find some funding because the city shouldn't have to pay for all that. So, any questions that I can answer on the TIP?
Councilmember Riddle.
Just some clarifications. There are 3 projects in the blue and beige, the SP and the CS, that claim they need funding, but they have projects next year. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're going to fill that gap? So that would be SP03, CS05, and CS07.
So those, I put those down as need funding, but I'll be just putting them in the budget. So it is anticipated we'd be able to use some of our local transportation funds for that based on the safety, the transportation calming, all those kind of funds. But since the budget hasn't been approved yet, that's why those say need funds.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Good.
This is a really great document. I'm very happy to see it. Thank you so much for taking the time to put it together. Will this be emailed to us, the final version?
Yeah, absolutely. We can, I've already provided it to the clerk, so it should be available for the meeting for everyone. And then the other thing we'll be working on, I'll be working with staff on, is getting some updates to the transportation. Well, we don't even have one yet, the transportation website. So we'll have, under our engineering tab, we'll have a transportation website, which will include this and the map.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Golden.
Yes, I'm excited about this. My question is, what will be the best way for us to be informed about, the status of these projects? So there's quite a bunch that are listed for 2027, and just, are they on track? Have they been completed? That sort of thing.
So for council, we do have the TIP, the CIP, thank you, dashboard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know.
The dashboard. And so we'll be updating probably quarterly, I would think, on that. So that'd be definitely at a minimum. But as far as kind of the public and everyone else, if they don't want to come to the council meetings, which I don't understand why they wouldn't want to, but we will be, like I said, upping that communication on our web page. And so the map ultimately will be interactive. You'll be able to click on the project and see the most current information.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Rosano.
Hi, yeah, this is not something that needs to be updated to right now, but I wonder, on looking at Briarcrest, I know I've gotten feedback from people that students will sometimes cut through on 156th,
Sure.
which is not one of the ones that's marked there. Is that just in a longer term plan, or are you concerned about if we do calming on 158th and 160th in Briarcrest, that it will push any more traffic then onto 156th, the next street down that goes down the hill?
I think that these were just the top 2 priorities I put on the 6-year, and I think you'd see that one on the more like the 20+ year.
Okay, yeah, just making sure it was on the radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Furtoni.
And thank you, Director Heaton. This is an amazing thing. I really want to express my appreciation for addressing, I think it was Council Priority 8 last year, what I'm calling Ellen's Crosswalk at 40th and 178th.
2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Jesus.
February
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
FP03.
Yes, SPO3, let's call it that.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that plus the work along 178th, I think that will be a welcome change for anybody trying to access town center. So I commend you on your staff and your work on getting this to reality.
I think one of the hardest parts about the entire TIP is picking and choosing. There's a lot of great projects we all want to do, and we will go after funding very aggressively to try to do as many as we can as soon as we can, and then keep doing them. So if we can knock more off the list than what this shows us, then we're going to add more in. So
Councilmember Riddle.
Unless Councilmember Muhlenberg has I don't want to step in
Councilmember
front.
Muhlenberg, do you have any comments or questions? I want to make sure we don't miss you.
Yeah, and Saunders.
No,
And
I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, and Councilmember Saunders, of course. She and I spoke at length about this earlier today, actually. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Councilmember, go ahead.
So one, thank you for the 40th Street crosswalk. Even though it's a kind of a more of an interim, I think that's what we were talking about. Let's do some quick, get something in and then kind of come back and do more of a full-fledged. Do you feel like that process might be useful for the Briarcrest neighborhood at 158th and 160th? I'm not 100% sure what your vision is for what will be done in 2029. But is there any interim striping planter type of thing that might be a useful interim solution?
I don't have an answer to that. I'd have to take a look.
Okay.
And see what I could come up with. But that is a part of the multimodal improvement plan that we're kind of working towards. So I think some of those things will come out as you guys see that multimodal improvement plan coming your way, and we continue talking about it over the year. I'm not done talking about transportation, it turns out.
Yes, I just thank you for all your effort in getting quick results and then going to kind of a full-fledged put a bow on it later when we have more funding. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
I do have just one note, which is, what does RRFB stand for?
Oh, rapid repeating flashing beacon, RRFB. So the flashing, the disco lights at the crossings.
Thank you for that. I couldn't remember this morning, actually. Somebody mentioned it to me and I went,
Right. Railroad Facebook?
Yeah.
I don't know, right?
yeah,
Classic engineering problem. We use a lot of.
it's all good. Well, and just two quick comments, colleagues, if I may. 7 years in this adventure in leading the traffic safety initiative, trying to get this thing moving forward as best we can. We have funding. We need more funding.
Always.
Right, top slide. You took the slide down, Matt. Top there's the funding, and I will tease you all with the fact that. And again, it's my fervent hope that the council will approve some additional traffic safety camera implementations on a provisional basis, and some of them not a temporary basis, but to help backstop this. And to the question of Briarcrest, it's been a problem for 50 years. We are very aware of it. Chief Zanella and I were up in the Briarcrest neighborhood last at the National Night Out. And both of the meetings that we were at there and the barbecues we were at, people expressed their concerns about 58th, 60th, the various streets. And this is a huge opportunity for some immediate traffic calming measures, and recognizing fully that we have to work with our friends at Shoreline on other issues. They have roundabouts up there. There's traffic flow things, but we do need to absolutely take care of that. So, and that's the more immediate things are not part of this process, this program. So, any other questions, colleagues? Thank you, everybody. And I think you're staying with us for
Well, actually,
number 2 here. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah.
I'd like to move Resolution 26-2075, Transportation Improvement Program for the calendar years 2027 through 2032.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 26-2075, Transportation Improvement Program for the calendar years 2027 through 2032. This is the third presentation. Colleagues, any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you very much, you guys online. Any nays? The ayes have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you so much, everybody. Way to go, Director Heaton. Thank you. Yeah, that's important work. Goodness. Moving on to Road Safety Action Plan, RSAP, second presentation, previously the local road safety plan.
Yeah, the plan formerly known as, that's what I put on my spreadsheet. So yeah, they changed the acronym on me, and so I'm like, oh, I gotta change it. But I've been working on local road safety plans so long that this is definitely gonna trip me up several times. Okay, so the road safety action plan, this brought several of the projects you just approved, yay, thank you so much, forward. So you guys have seen this before. This is actually your second touch on this, formerly known as local road safety plan. The 7 components of a road safety action plan are leadership, commitment, and goal setting, planning structure, safety analysis, engagement and collaboration, policy and process changes, strategy and project selection, progress and transparency. We've been working on this. You have been working on the components of this before I got here. And Transpo, our transportation consultant, has also been helping us. That's okay. It was dumb anyway. This is all based just like
in there somewhere.
Just like before, this is all based on the SAFE system, which is really about redundancy is crucial. Death and serious injury is unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared, and safety is proactive. And so that's really what all of this planning is based around, and just trying ultimately to save lives. This program comes from a lot of community engagement that has happened over the past. That's not going to stop. This plan, the safety plan, is updated yearly. It'll be updated both for where we're at, but also changing needs, looking at the safety data year after year to see if there have been different patterns or different changes that we need to address. So, and hopefully as we're reducing accidents in one place, we will find, then we'll go with the lower targets, and we'll start to reduce accidents in those places as well. There's your safe system. There's your outreach. All right, here's your draft projects. I'm not going to talk about these a lot because we just talked about most of them. But these are our safety plan projects that have come forward, including the crosswalk at 40th and 178th. But we also see things on here like the driver education campaign. So this will be something that we'll be working on with the PD to talk about educating drivers and helping them to get to some of those targeted risks that we see over and over again, like cell phone use and things like that. So I'll be working with the PED to create this driver education campaign, following it, and then also trying to do some matrices, forget it, data that we can track and check on. Oh, I went the wrong way. We go. All right, you have the draft plan. It was attached to the agenda. Please review, comment. This is the time. I'm looking for input. I'm looking for ideas. Yes, we just approved the TIP, but that doesn't mean changing this won't change future projects or future things. So this is all about interactive with the community. And making sure that we're looking and we're thinking and we're considering different what the community sees as well as what the data shows us. That's it. Questions, comments?
Cool. Councilmember Riddle, and then Vice Chair Goldman.
Thank you again for this next step and how we can actually make our city safer. Is part of the education piece also perhaps educating the community for near misses and so that they can report those things so their data is more well-rounded? Is that an aspect that you've considered?
That is not an aspect I've considered, and I will have to think about how I would be able to do that. But I could work with the PD. We could talk through ways in which that might be considered.
Thank you, because I know that they don't often get reported if no one actually gets hit, but some people jump across, ditches to avoid getting hit, and it'd be nice to know about those sorts of near misses as well.
Yeah, great.
Vice Chair Goldman.
Yeah, I possibly should have asked this one earlier, but Project 5, which is the 522 speed limit reductions, it says that there's $50,000 allocated for it. As my question is, we can't lower the speed limit, that has to be WashDOT. And so what is the city's plan to encourage WashDOT to do that, and why the 50,000?
50,000 is just a round number that I stuck in there. I don't expect to have to spend that. I really hope not to have to spend that. But I put it on there because I want to make sure that it shows that we are willing to replace the signs ourselves if we absolutely had to, or something like that. Or if we needed to do some sort of study to back up what we're asking for. I think that that's what that money represents. My goal is to do it for much less. My plan is actually to take the data we already have and write to them and write to our legislators. And actually, it'll be coming from our mayor. But to move forward with that.
Administrator Hill.
Just to add to that, the study that we had Transpo Group conduct has been submitted to WashDOT. They are reviewing it. And there is supposed to be a future meeting, and we're probably getting to the point where I have to reach out and say, when is that future meeting? It's been about 3 weeks since we met with them last, but so we have had those meetings. We had an initial meeting, the wrong people were in the room. We rescheduled, got their traffic engineers in the room, educated them. I actually asked them to come out and drive the corridor instead of telling me why it wouldn't work when it works in Bothell and we have almost the same context. And so we're just waiting to hear back on that. So it is moving forward at their leisurely pace.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'm on point as being part of the last meeting with not the last meeting, but the previous meeting with WashDOT. You all have heard my frustration with their recalcitrance and intractability. They've got dead man's curve at 35, and yet we have 40 through here where we have pedestrians crossing constantly, and there are no pedestrian crossings at Wayne Golf Course curve. We're going to continue to push really hard for this. This is an issue of life safety, and it has been for many years. And it does cost money to change the signs. We have to pay for that. There are various things that we have to take care of there. But at the same time, we'll get it done. And right now, I think it's the perfect environment to make sure it happens, because construction is coming with Sound Transit, and people are going to have to slow down no matter what. Why not get them used to it? So, Councilmember Rosenau.
Yeah. For the roundabout, I know we talked before about the concern that there may be an increase of at least fender benders there. I believe that Shoreline had some sort of roundabout simulator that they've had available at City Hall or elsewhere. I wonder, is that something that we might try to do something similar as part of the education programs you're talking about?
The roundabout team has a pretty robust plan for outreach and education for the roundabout, and they're working with the PD on that. So I can ask them specifically about the roundabout simulator, or if they have heard about that. But yeah, I know they're working very hard to ensure that we've got this kind of driver education moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I wonder if it's something we can even borrow or something. The other question I wanted to ask was, I've been wondering about, and this may be actually a throwback to the previous item, but implementation of the state's safe streets legislation that allows on things like, I would imagine, healthy streets, the option of 10-mile-an-hour speed limits. Is that something that factors into either of these two items that you've presented?
It factors into both of these two items. I have to write a policy and do some code changes to implement that reduced speed limit. That's a requirement that we basically put together a justification for why we would reduce the speed limit on a street. So it's absolutely part of the safety plan. And it's also really a part of the TIP, and it's on my work plan for this year.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, other questions for Director Heaton? Exciting work. We're so thrilled.
And
Please.
I want to add my kudos to you for basically another wonderful report. I'm just wondering, there's not a whole lot of attention paid for the multimodal. I know that we are tracking hit pedestrians and hit bicycles, but given basically the preponderance of scooters and other forms of multimodal transportation, is there room in this to basically include some of that information too?
I would keep the road safety action plan as it is because we are actively working on the multimodal improvement plan, which is going to end up kind of dovetailing into probably a little bit of a complete streets update, I guess I would call it.
Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Good.
As a side note, didn't they just now require helmets for these scooters?
There's big change in the legislation around bikes and mopeds and motorcycles, and that has gotten updated in the state, which is actually really great for us because in my former city, I was trying to get some of those updates changed through the city code, and it ended up being pretty hectic because that is how the PD is able to actually ticket and actually enforce. And so it is really great that the state just updated that stuff. That does include bicycle helmets.
So we'll be including that with our stuff.
The PD is actually working right now on some updates for that. Hopefully they know that.
Relative to
Thank you.
e-bikes and scooters, we already have an ordinance in place for cycles, which is unfortunately unique. You heard me speak to this before. It is an issue of public health, and it should be a King County health thing, ubiquitous across the county. It's about children and everybody's well-being. And now the technology is to a place where we need to adapt and update our regulations around that and make sure there are no further tragedies.
And I'll also share that I know we're working on some guidance documentation and then again on that more robust website. So we've got some examples of some excellent informational to get it out to the people because it's new, right? And so what are the rules and what are there? So I've looked at some, and I know a city administrator Hill has looked at some, and the PD is looking at them now too. So we're working through it.
Great, thank you, Director Hughes. Okay, thank you. You've been on the spot here for long enough. Thank you so much for
That's touch too.
your contribution.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Our friend Mr. McLean is going to come out from behind the curtain and bring back to us Ordinance 261317 Master Use Permit for Forge Fiber 37 LLC. This will be the second presentation. And I will just preempt you, Matt, by saying, unless there's anything new, colleagues, this is a question and answer session, and Mr. McLean is available, as well as City Attorney Pratt. I see Councilmember Muhlenberg has his hand up. Matt.
Very excited to see another vendor entering the fiber space in Lake Forest Park. I was unable to attend the last meeting because I was on a work trip and just didn't work, but I found myself very curious about what the right-of-way meant. And when I look at the map that was provided in the materials tonight, it seems to reflect the same map that was previously owned by Quest Communications or US West or whatever their brand name is these days. Did this provider buy that bandwidth and they're leasing back to AT&T, who bought the fiber business, the fiber lines on that fiber? And will they be bringing a competitive service to our market so that our citizens will have an option to choose between Comcast or AT&T or the provider we're talking about tonight? And forgive me, Matt, for not remembering their name.
Yes, they bought Lumen's fiber lines. Are they bringing additional competition? I believe so, but I can't answer that. And unfortunately, PROCLAMATIONS is not online tonight, so that's actually a question I'd have to get back to you on.
Okay.
Thank,
I would be super excited to know that AT&T was going to continue to carry and offer service in our community, but this company is also going to offer direct service in our marketplace. It would be great for our citizens.
thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, other questions for Clerk McLean? I would offer, oh, yeah, Deputy Mayor, for time.
And yeah, and thank you for bringing this back. And I really appreciate Councilmember Muhlenberg's point about increased competition. You know, one of the things that has been happening more recently are internet outages. And trying to get some better service and more reliable service might be a thing that we can ask another competitor to do. So it is really important to find. I'd be very interested in the answer to that question too. Thanks.
And I don't want to put Matt on the spot here, but I would also offer to my colleagues, this may be an opportunity for us to hold their feet to the fire about the minimum height requirements for safety for fiber optic installations. That was not part of the contract. So I don't know whether their assumption of the contract, Attorney Pratt.
Everything that's in the code for master use permits is in this. So maybe are you talking about maybe a possible code change? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, my question is more about there are standards, 18 feet. I think we had an email exchange about this quite a while ago, whether or not that has to be in the code, but I thought it was a standard across the board. I know Bellevue has people out there with sticks when people are installing fiber optics. Yeah, not to put you on the spot, Kim. It just occurred to me just now. Part of it is it comes down to you look across the streets and you look behind town center here, and we've had situations where people can't get a vehicle into their driveway because of fiber optics that are draped down cables, telecommunications. And I'm sorry, but I know that the federal government did not have that in mind with the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I believe. Anyway, so something bookmark for future conversation. Colleagues, other questions for Mr. McLean? Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. Oh, okay, we're moving on to new business. We like new business. I believe we have Executive Dickinson online right now for a professional services agreement for on-call engineering services and engineering support services for the Sound Transit Permit Review. Welcome, Rebecca.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor French and council members. Tonight, I'm presenting for your consideration a series of resolutions authorizing professional service agreements with 4 qualified consulting firms, DEA, Geoengineers, OTAC, and PACE Engineers, to provide both general on-call engineering services and specialized engineering support associated with the Sound Transit BRT permit review activities, and then also our on-call support. These contracts provide the city with access to specialized expertise on an as-needed basis through individual task orders. So we plan to implement this through a task order system. The approach allows the city to obtain technical resources quickly and efficiently without maintaining those capabilities in-house or undertaking separate procurements for each assignment. The authorization of the PSEs will provide additional support to city staff to assist us in responding efficiently to the numerous application submissions for the Sound Transit project, and in addition to support other right-of-way application permit processing efforts. To ensure that adequate staff resources are available to support Sound Transit's permit applications and permitting engineering support, staff requests that City Council waive the 3-touch rule and adopt resolutions 2076 through 2083, authorizing the mayor to sign the on-call engineering services and Sound Transit BRT engineering support service contracts with David Evans and Associates, Geoengineers, OTAC Incorporated, and Pace Engineering.
Colleagues, I would like to start with Councilmember Muhlenberg because he reached out to me for a question that I could not answer. Matt, are you there?
I am here. There was a whole collection of permits that are, or I guess, contracts that are being proposed tonight in a series of different resolutions. And what I was wondering about was arborists and trees in the Sound Transit projects, and what level of on-site verification or validation will happen as these permits are submitted. Do we go out with arborists? I didn't see arborists in any of these added contracted positions, and it feels like the one we have on staff is probably not sufficient.
That is outside of this particular discussion, for at least for me. Mark Hoffman, Community Planning, we were just having a discussion about this today, and he would be the best one to answer that question for you.
He's stepping up to the podium now. You can't see him, I don't think. You can wave your hands and the camera might find you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the last year, we've been trying to perfect our permit tracking software. We've come a long way. We were lucky to recruit a highly skilled urban forest planner, and the first 6-month work plan, along with 3 to 4 work efforts, was, are we implementing tree code correctly, including checklists, processes, proper findings. And so I believe between existing staff and a possibility of a coverage consultant, we can get it done. The existing staff and what we have in place will function. We just don't know that it will be sufficient. So given the time, there is an opportunity that was created last week that I think would really assist. And I won't describe it here, but we would like to pursue it. We don't know if a certain number of applications truly are going to come in at the end of the month, but if they do, we have time to administer them. We have that in place, and our urban forest planner and I will. I can promise you we'll be in every yard. Now the corridor is going to be pretty wide. It's 500 feet on each side, so it won't just be the properties bordering 522. So that's the unknown. If we commit to diligent review and action on these type 3 ministerial permits, there may be a point where we're going to need assistance. I don't think it will be on the decision making, but I think it may be on procedures and the volume. And so this opportunity that was created last week would be that overflow.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Hoffman. Councilmember Muhlenberg, do you have while Director Hoffman's up at the podium, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I want to give the rest of the council an opportunity. I don't want to be out of line by asking 2 questions in a row, but if it's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Council, is that okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead, since Director Hoffman's on deck.
Yeah, so Director Hoffman, you commented on the size of the zone where these trees are impacted and how some of that spills off of properties that are outside of the 522 corridor. I've taken the time to take the 70% plan and the 100% plans and convert the architectural drawings into a database of all the trees that are listed. And when you compare those 2 lists, there's somewhere between 900 and 1,100 trees total that are in the zone. Just under 400 of them are identified as trees that are going to be removed. And there's this interesting drift that occurs where some trees appear only in the 70% plan and some only appear in the 100% plan, but they're not in both. I just want to make sure that as a city, we understand that what the Sound Transit has provided may be very comprehensive, but there is this discrepancy that exists between 70 and 100 and this drift that has occurred of trees that are either in the temporary right-of-way or are now in yards or were in the right-of-way. It's super important to me to understand that we are going to have the opportunity to be on site and actually touch all 1,100 of those trees in this process.
Correct. The process is there. We won't trespass. To me, the 70%, 100% design are irrelevant. Whatever we're handed when the application actually comes in, the process would allow us that opportunity. And we'll need time. That's a lot of property owners, and they're not instantly available. So we acknowledge that. But I'm hoping to have that covered. And then the review will take place and it'll be pursued for as long as needed. But we'll pursue it diligently. My goal is to talk to anyone that we can, look at every tree. And
Great,
it's
thank
not,
you.
it's just not the corridor trees, it's also the replacement plan.
Yeah. Thank you. Great
Yeah.
question.
Thank you.
Councilmember Riddle and then Councilmember Good.
I think I know what a task order system is, but could you just briefly describe that for folks that aren't familiar with it?
So the task order system generally breaks it down to individual tasks or design work, for instance, that would need to occur that it may be specialized to specific permits. And so task orders would be created. And what that does is it allows us to condense down specific actions that are required and track those better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question. Councilmember Good.
So I see that these engineering firms are also the engineering firms that are contracted that have developed the plan for Sound Transit. And I'm just wondering, is there any conflict of interest for them to assist with that work when they're the ones that actually did the plan?
That was something that we addressed directly when we did our interviewing process and also just bringing in these specific firms, and they had to assure that they did not have a conflict of interest in order to participate in this process, or they would need to recuse themselves.
And can I follow up? And how would they do that? Because they've been deeply embedded in the whole plan from the beginning. And so for them to say, oh, well, it's fine, and I'm not so confident that that would, be that way. I'm a little bit more suspicious of some of these firms with my experience with some of them. So I'm just concerned.
Noted. I would say Director Dickinson probably can't answer that specific question, but it is a valid concern. Thank you for that. Going around the horn here, Deputy Mayor Furtani.
And just to make it absolutely clear, these firms, their rate sheets I'm in the wrong business as it turns out, but nevertheless,
Give me both.
these are all being paid for through the permit fees, all these contracts.
How this is going to work is that we have a pass through where the various consultants will invoice, and then we will then turn those invoices over to Sound Transit. So then that's the arrangement that we have in place with them. Outside of that, though, we do have these separate on-call contracts for other right-of-way permit review that is a city function, not a Sound Transit issue. So that's why we have so many of these documents, because we have a separated on-call contract with them as well, just to help assist us in augmenting our team for processing, because we will have so many applications to deal with on the Sound Transit. And we will still be assisting, and we have a very small staff. So.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Colleagues, other questions for Director Dickinson? Councilmember Rosenau.
Yeah, just following up on that last part. So that means, these will also be doing other review on other projects in the city during that crunch time. Is that it's sort of two tracks with this?
Yes, we currently have an augmented system where we have one of the engineering groups who has been helping us processing overflow kind of with our existing senior project manager, who's also assigned to many, many other projects, and recognizing that already overburdened and understaffed, and with an opportunity to have additional support with these on-call consultants with various different backgrounds and specialties, we decided to jump on that and bring them in so we can do an assignment and kind of separate. So we're not loading up just one consulting firm, but give responsibilities to each.
Thank you very
And
much,
then
Director.
will is the idea that basically everything will flow to one of these contractors, or will some of this still be done in-house?
Some will still be done in-house. I'm just anticipating, I'm trying to be really proactive, and it's hard to say because we haven't received the applications from Sound Transit yet, but just trying to be proactive in supporting our in-house staff so that they can also still give attention to regular projects.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosenau. Other questions for Director Dickinson? If not, I understand that Vice Chair Goldman had a procedural as our resident guru on procedure. Yeah, and thespian, as it were, here. I'm not sure what the right word is. A way to proceed.
So I consulted with our city attorney, and because there are 8 separate resolutions, all of which it's only their first touch. So the plan that I'd like us to consider is the first motion would be to waive the 3-touch rule for all 8 resolutions. And then we would consider each company one by one. So we would consider, for instance, the first 2 resolutions that deal with David Evans. And then we would consider the 2 resolutions that deal with the next company and the next one after that. And so effectively, this would be in 5 stages. This way, if a council member had concerns about one particular company, they could flag that. But I think that's the most efficient way to get through all 8 of these contracts in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goldman. Anybody have any questions or concerns? I think it's a very expeditious and efficient way to proceed. Councilmember,
Are you suggesting we're taking action on this tonight?
that was a request.
Yes, I believe that's actually, I'll let Director or Executive Dickinson talk about that, but I believe the concern is that since Sound Transit may be applying for these permits shortly, we want these contracts in place in advance of those permit applications. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Sorry, I think I spoke for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Colleagues, what's your pleasure? Any other questions or concerns? If not, let's begin the process, if we could, please. Councilor Vice Chair Goldman.
All right, so I will start by moving that we waive the 3-touch rule with regard to resolutions 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, and 2083, professional services agreements with various on-call engineering services.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to waive the 3-touch rule for resolutions 2076 through 2083. Any further discussion, colleagues? Deputy Mayor Furtoni.
I'd like to speak for the motion. This is something of a rush because as Director Dickinson pointed out, we don't know when the permit applications from Sound Transit are coming, and so having the firms queued up and ready to deal with them seems to be the best response the city can give. Further, I know there are some concerns about basically the trees and various other aspects of the project, but I'm really hoping that that's what's going to come out by hiring these firms that have much more expertise than our local staff. And I don't mean any disrespect to local staff at all, of course, but it's just a lot of work in running down all this stuff. And so I think I'm in favor of the motion for those reasons.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else want to speak to the motion on the floor? Vice Chair Goldman.
So in addition to those reasons, from the financial perspective, since these are on-call agreements, if we don't use the companies, we don't pay anything out of pocket for that. And if we do use them, the money is coming through, at least for the Sound Transit permits, by Sound Transit. And for local permits, it's by whatever individual is applying for those permits. So there is no direct financial impact to the city.
Councilmember Good.
Like I wanted to bring up that this is the first time that it's been brought in front of us. And I understand the reasoning, I understand the cost, I understand everything. But I still think that bringing this motion here now without any public input about these services for these companies that are already have been hired to do this work, and now they're going to be hired by us to work on their own permits, I think is inappropriate. And I understand, the reasoning behind it, but for some of these firms, I think that it's a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions or comments on the motion at hand? All those in favor of suspension of three-touch rule regarding resolutions 2076, 20 through 2083 signify by saying aye.
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 Nay.
The record reflect, I couldn't hear quite from out there, so I think it's 5 ayes and 1 nay. Is that correct?
That's what I heard,
Okay, making sure.
unless Ellen, I didn't hear. She's-
Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. Making sure we
5.
have people out there. I don't know who's, yeah, okay. Because I know Ellen had indicated, Councilmember Saunders had indicated she has a very, very early night tonight. Thank you, Council. Please proceed, Vice Chair Goldman.
So next motion, since we'll be considering the companies one by one, I will like to move resolution 2076 and resolution 2080 regarding professional services agreements with David Evans and Associates.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolutions 2076 and 2080 for contracts with David Evans and Associates with suspension of three-touch rule. Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, going once. All those in favor of motion adopting resolutions 2076 and 2080 for contracts with David Evans and Associates, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
I think it was 5-1 again. Yeah.
I
Five
heard
one.
both,
Okay.
Yeah.
That was interesting. A lot of static in there for a second. Okay.
There's a delay on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. 5-1 again. Thank you. Please continue, Vice Chair Goldman.
I'd like to move that we approve resolutions 2077 and 2081, professional services agreements with Geoengineers Incorporated.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to with suspension of three-touch rule approving resolutions 2077 and 2081 for contracts with Geoengineers Incorporated. Any comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption, please say aye.
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 Nay.
Nay. Didn't hear two from the audience out here. Is that,
I only heard one.
did I get,
I heard Josh say aye. I didn't hear.
did I hear, Matt, are you on?
Yeah, I said aye as well.
Okay, sorry, there's a delay there. Okay, five yays and 1 nay. Thank you, Council. I don't know, it's funny, seeing geoengineers is, my brain goes gooey duck for some reason. Please continue, Vice Chair.
I would like to move that we approve resolutions 2078 and 2082, professional services agreements with OTAC.
Second.
It's been moved in the second with suspension of three-touch rule, approving resolutions 2078 and 2082 for contracts with OTAC Incorporated. Any further questions, comments? Councilmember.
What kind of company is that? Is OTEC?
Engineering.
For what though? Do we know?
Or I sure.
It's civil engineering and structural engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, we fired them before.
Pardon me? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Deputy Refer Tony.
Actually, Director
It's
Hopkins,
definitely, they're pretty broad. It includes
Sure.
environmental planning, trees and
Right.
so forth.
I believe we've also hired them before.
Oh, yes.
And one of the main consultants on our comprehensive plan now works at OTAC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hoffman. Appreciate that very much. Any other questions or concerns, colleagues? All those in favor of suspension of three-touch rule and adopting resolutions 2078 and 2082 for contracts with OTAC Incorporated, please say aye.
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 Okay. And any nays?
I said aye.
Oh, you said aye. Oh, okay. For engineering. Sorry.
I'm very particular.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so the record is it was unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Motion.
Okay, I'd like to move that we approve resolutions 2079 and 2083, professional services agreements with Pace Engineers.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
And I'd like to speak to the motion. The city has successfully done work with PACE before, so.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Colleagues, looking down the aisle, checking online. No, hearing none. All those in favor of adoption with suspension of three-touch rule, approving resolutions 2089 and
779 was a typo.
Oh, 2079. Thank you. I can barely read this anyway. I need to make my screen bigger. 2079 and 2083 for contracts with Pace Engineers Incorporated. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Now say it.
Wait for it. Any nays? The ayes have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Yeah, I think we're set. Thank you, Ms. Dickinson. We really appreciate your efforts on our behalf. This is very helpful. And I would just say to the public and to my fine colleague over here, Ms. Good, many of these big firms, engineering or law firms, they do the sounds trite, the Chinese wall, where they have to be separated completely. So fair enough. And skepticism is your right. But I do believe we have done business with many of these firms, and it is important. Thank you, council, for approving this because it helps the team move forward and to make sure that we do not get into a place where we're behind the curve. So thank you so much for that. Moving forward, Director Vaughn, goodness, Ordinance 2613. 18, amending the 25-26 budget. And I know this is not going to be the last time we're going to have this conversation.
I think, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am trying to give our clerk just a minute to pull up the schedule of adjustments. But the previous conversation walks right into one of the things that we're asking in the general fund to be amended, which is that exact concept where there is a bucket of money that is received by the city for the Stride project. And how we define this money is not actually revenue. I want to be very clear that it is it's a holding bucket. It is a direct pass through. And you will see that it's italicized up there, even though it's a little bit small. And it walks down right at the end of the general fund into expenditures going straight through for community development and the public works. Just divided evenly, that can be interchanged as it might be in the future. But I just want to be very clear. It's equivalent to like when you are renting and you pay a deposit that is refundable. This money is not necessarily revenue. So I just want to be really clear on the record for that. There is within the general fund some revenue that is coming through that is revenue. It's for our third party, our police services when we provide security. So our third party, they reimburse us as a city, and it goes directly into as a pass through the police overtime line, as that's where it's being paid out of. So then walking down to some of the other expenditures into the general fund, some of these are just simply housekeeping. We just, again, a very common theme. It was a very lean budget, and we are just going over, getting really close on some of these line items. So you're going to hear that a couple times. There was a large hearing and SEPA support. So there's a couple items on here that the city, we're doing a bit of an estimate at this point on what that is going to cost the city. But we do know it's a larger dollar amount, and we're trying to amend that. We're not trying to, I'm asking to amend that within the general fund to try to increase those expenditures, as they definitely are already coming through for the city. So then again, municipal services, the newsletter, election costs, these are all what I would define as just operational costs that are just exceeding how the city budgeted them, which was lean. And the election cost that is being requested to increase because it does have the potential. Normally, the invoices will hit in January. However, King County has been doing a better job of invoicing the cities within the appropriate fiscal year. And so just because there runs the risk of having that actually hit within the 2026 fiscal year, the city does need to amend that to increase, potentially realizing those costs within this fiscal year. As the city just completed quite a few audits this year, we are looking to already walk into in the fall, the 2025 fiscal or financial and accountability audit. And so we do need to expand that budget, as we have already exceeded what we had within the 2025-26 budget. But I do want to remind you that the city did complete the 2023 and 2024 financial, the 23-24 accountability, and the 2 attestation audits. So there were quite a few audits that were actually completed. So the fact that the city did go over by an additional $14,000, that was a lot of audits to complete within within a biennium. So actually was worked out pretty well. So then walking down to the police salaries and benefits, this is due to the fact that the police department is just realizing some larger retirements from some very long-standing employees, and there is a cost to that. And then again, as I was saying, the additional cost of the hearing and the support within the community development department, and some of the costs associated within that. And then walking down with council previously approved the expansion to have our previous public works director stay on as our program executive. And so you're going to see that throughout multiple funds that is tied directly to, as it was described on the agenda cover. So that was not in the original budget and is being requested to be amended in. And walking down to the traffic safety fund, if we can scroll down just a little bit. Maybe. Okay, I'll just keep, there we go. So walking down to the motorcycle request that the previous police chief brought forward, you're going to see a couple costs associated directly with that within this request. So it's the addition tied directly to the CBA for the increase of the salary. So you're going to see some salaries and benefits tied directly to the employee that will be allocated that motorcycle. Then in addition, the actual motorcycle purchase is being funded from that fund. So you're going to see that 3 times on this amendment being transferred out of the traffic safety fund into the vehicle fund, and then the expense because that's where the city will actually pay for it. So you're going to see that complete crosswalk. Walking into previously what the city administrator Hill recently brought forward to you was the prosecutor's contract. And there is a component of that contract that increased to the point of $36,000 that is tied directly to the traffic safety fund. And so with the additional anticipated increase, we increased that within the general fund, but this is the cost associated directly with the traffic safety fund. And then again, the project in executive salary increase. And then you're going to see that there's the extruded curb walkway for 201st is being added within this as an expenditure, as our current public works director is working on that project. And then walking down to the strategic opportunity fund.
Director Vaughn, can I interrupt you just for a second,
Absolutely.
just for a public service announcement? Traffic Safety Fund 002 restricted fund, $310,000 is being spent in the community directly from traffic revenues straight into public safety. And it's important for everyone to recognize that. And we look forward to more of those expenditures in appropriate places. So thank you. Excuse me for the interruption.
No, absolutely.
The scheduled channel.
Please feel free to interrupt as as you would like. So, and then going down to the Strategic Opportunity Fund, this one, I'm not sure what happened here. I'm just going to own it. We had a contract in place. It was approved, and then somehow it didn't quite connect through to the contract and to the appropriate budget that was allocated for an assigned contract. And so we are increasing the budget an additional $500,000 in order to support a contract that has already been approved and is being executed through the city for the lakefront park on the phase 2 design, which is completely transparent there. So if we walk down, and that is being funded directly from, I guess I didn't say, the Capital Fund 301. And then walking down to the Capital Improvement Fund. So this is the feel good stuff. These are the grants that are coming through. So you've got some Get Active, Stay Active. So that money it's about $25,000. That's being directly put back into the Horizon View Trail rehab. The city anticipates at this time there might be a slight cost increase over what we think we will be receiving for the grant. So you're going to see that the expenditure is an additional $5,000 more than that. And then big shout out to City Administrator Hill for completing the King County Conservation Grant that the city received. And this is from a previous the Rose property purchase. And then going down, we have a couple other capital projects. The Animal Acres fence was not in good shape. And so this was not a planned project, but a required project due to the use of that park. And we don't want something that becomes a safety liability. So that is currently in place. And then walking down to the final thing, the Strategic Opportunity Fund, this is where the $500,000 is being transferred, is from that fund. So then going down to the Transportation Capital Fund, there's a couple expenditures. Again, I would define some of these as just simply housekeeping. The Transportation Capital Fund, that's associated with training and travel of our big transportation capital projects. So it's staff supporting our training program, which is, I think, highly valuable to all staff. And then again, salaries, and then the Hamlin handrail, that due to having to fix the handrail, we had to also bring it up to code. And so that was a project, and within that fund, we're actually just reallocating. So in an effort of full transparency, we're actually taking some of the funds that the city doesn't think we will fully expend within the guardrail replacement and reallocating it into that project. So just for full transparency, and we do still internally believe that the city is still has a healthy allocation towards the guardrail program that is going targeted to complete, finish some within this year. And then the final project within the Transportation Capital Fund is 37th Avenue, the elementary sidewalk. That design is being allocated to carry that project, to have it designed to eventually move it forward. Are there any questions on that? I'm feeling like that might be a good place to stop because I did cover some projects.
You're hearing none. 37th, if I recall correctly, it's both 37th streets, both schools.
I am going to immediately
Sorry to put you on the spot.
request
That
to
was
be
what-
saved
Safe
by
routes to
Butler
school.
Center.
Those are the projects.
That is for design for the one in front of LFP.
LFP.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we are putting in, as I've mentioned before, for funding. So hopefully we'll get some funding to construct that and then immediately be able to do work towards design on the next one.
Okay.
So
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because it's confusing. Both elementary schools are on 37th in two completely different places. Deputy Mayor Furtado.
And I wanted to point out to everyone that the work is going on currently at Animal Acres Park. So if you see the fence posts down, that's actually intentional. We're going to get a much nicer one. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the assist. So walking down to the sewer operations fund, we have the King County wastewater utility charge that we didn't quite budget, which is currently being reassessed on our calculations for our rate. But that is just a direct pass through. Ratepayers pay that direct amount of money that then gets paid to King County Metro's wastewater treatment charges. And so it just looks like that, calculating it out through the end of 2026, it's going to be a little lean. And so we're requesting to expand that just a little bit. And then again, employee salaries and taxes and assessments, that is, and actually maybe this is a point of education. This is money that the city pays when the city receives revenue. We pay on that revenue that is received through certain calculations to the Department of Revenue, through basically like an excise tax form that we pay on a monthly basis. And that was budgeted too lean. And so it does need to be expanded, and that's what's being requested right there. And then walking down to the sewer utility tax, the amount that was put into the general fund, because what happens is the utility tax is paid by the ratepayers, then it becomes an expense within the utility tax, and then transfers into being to the general fund as revenue. And for some reason, the amount that was budgeted and placed into the actual, and this is the same for the surface water. So the sewer and the surface water, the revenue coming in is right on track, but the expenditures is not. And so this is just truing up that expenditure to meet what is actually showing as revenue within the fund and revenue into the general fund. So I can't quite explain what happened there. I just am truing it up because it's not consistent. And what does matter when we adopt these budget amendments is that the expenditure allocation is appropriate and the city stays within that. And then walking down to the surface water operations fund, again, there's another grant that came through that was not budgeted from the Department of Ecology. And so I'm transparently sharing the good in addition to the increase of expenses. So, that grant is again to support operations and the additional permit charges that were budgeted as an expense. So again, salaries, and then walking down, same concept that I just explained For the sewer utility tax, same thing happened within both funds. So it's the surface water fund and the sewer fund. And so the city's just requesting to true that up. And then the surface water capital fund, again, there was another grant that came through for 133,000. And so we're truing that up to increase the revenue within that fund. And then this is one that the Public Works material bins, the original contract, the original estimate of what was placed into our budget, there was a delta between what was originally estimated and what the contract awarded for. So this is just a true up for that delta in addition to a little bit of a difference on the increase in sales tax. And so this goes back to not change orders. It's the original award delta of what the city budgeted versus what was basically awarded as the actual cost. And that was overlooked during the mid-buy, and I completely own it because finance should have caught that. But we've definitely figured it out now and are asking to true it up. And so then walking down to the final fund, the vehicle equipment and replacement fund, that is the traffic safety fund, and that is the motorcycle that is being funded again through the traffic safety through that fund. And I believe that's in the very near future. It's been on order and the city's anticipating to receive it soon. So just to keep you informed on that. And then I do want to highlight one more thing. If we can scroll down to the balances right there. This is not something that you're going to see on a budget amendment, but I just want to show that the action is being completed, and I'm asking for it to be paired and mirrored on this request to take the 1.6 that has been previously discussed through all of the budget challenge discussions. And I want you to highlight that the beginning fund balance and the ending fund balance, if you just take this expenditure and walk it through in the general fund, you're going to say the math doesn't add up. And you're right, it doesn't. So we're taking that requested 1.6 and we're going to move it to the Strategic Opportunity Fund, as has been very publicly discussed. And that's happening through this, basically when council adopts this ordinance, that transaction will also be completed as part of this budget amendment. So I just wanted to highlight that and show you that action is also being requested through this very transparently. And that concludes my overview of the budget amendment. Are there any additional questions?
Colleagues, pardon me, sound like a frog here. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
And Director Vaughn, thank you so much for this. I'm just always amazed that you and your staff are keeping track of every one of these things. I think it really shows that the city's very conscientious about the taxpayer dollar, and that, the fact that you're as transparent as you are about this entire, even the money that we just essentially hold for somebody else and pass on through. I think it's amazing that we keep track of this to this degree. And, the fact that we win awards on this every year, that your team wins awards on this every year, is a testament to the fact that, yeah, we're just really careful with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Excuse me. Yeah. No, I don't have water here. Thank you. I'll just keep drinking it. Thank you very much. Colleagues, and I will check the dais and then check our friends online. Any questions for Director Vaughn? While you're ruminating, I would just note that it's very easy to see expenditures and not recognize that some of these are transfers from revenues that have come into other funds and moving over to other places. So it is not the city shamelessly spending the public's good-earned money. It's things are being moved over from different funds as they should be. So again, my caution is to not think about the gross expenditures, think about revenues versus expenditures and how things are coming in from grants, because the community has done a great job of realizing those grants. Maybe we're for Tony.
All right, well, I'd like to move Ordinance 261318, amending the 2025-2026 budget.
We would have to waive the three touch.
Okay,
first.
let's do that. But actually, may I ask a question first?
Absolutely.
Director Rod, is there a timeliness factor here?
There really isn't. If you want to move it, it's just one more thing that's in the to done column versus the to do column. But if you would like time to sit on this and to continue to review it, that's completely whatever is council's pleasure on this one.
Yes, please.
I
Councilmember.
think I would like some more time to digest and just kind of wrap my head around it a little bit more. But I think we could bring it back.
The 25th?
Yeah.
Right.
That would make more sense to me and be more comfortable with that.
All right.
Are you available on the 25th?
Remotely?
Remotely, okay. So I just would throw the caution in there. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I concur. I think there's enough meat on this that I would like to give us and the public a chance to look it over. If there aren't any questions on the 25th, then at that point, I'd be happy to waive the three touch rule. But I think giving us a couple of weeks would be appropriate.
Okay. I don't think I have to withdraw my motion, but I will.
Well, it wasn't seconded, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I also will share that I think there's enough moving parts on some other things that I was hopeful that this would be the final budget amendment for the year. But I do want to plant the seed that I'm not so sure that will be the case. Just because there are some moving parts that are too unknown at this time, and it would not be fair to bring them forward to request any form of an ask from council without knowing more, in order to very responsibly ask for them. So I do want to just plant that seed that there may, and I'm not saying there will, but I'm going to plant the seed that there may be another budget amendment that is requested within 2026. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Director. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Excellent presentation and great questions, colleagues. We are moving on to items for council discussion and action. Item A, continued discussion regarding city financial outlook and budget strategies. I was going to hand this off to the deputy mayor since he's been leading these discussions.
All right. Well, what I'd like to do is just so that it focuses us on a particular action item that we can do, I'd like to propose a resolution to direct the administration to draft a resolution to authorize a 22 cents per thousand levy lid lift for the term 2027 to 2032.
Second.
I'm sure I get this correct. The motion on the table is to draft a 22 cents per 1,000 levy lid lift resolution to bring back to council.
Right. For the term 2027 to 2032.
27, 2032. I'm sure we'll have these in the notes. And then your request is for the next meeting.
For the next meeting.
Okay. Staff, is that doable before we move?
It is doable. There's so much math that goes into this that we need to understand what the rate is council wants to pursue, or at least discuss passing a resolution to pursue. So knowing the rate per thousand, we can plug in the numbers. There was also previously a request to expand section 4 on the use of levy proceeds. I've been working with Attorney Pratt on some language for that. So I think I would like to scurry and get this, at least a preliminary draft to you for the upcoming COW, I believe we have. Do we have a COW? We have a COW coming up.
Don't have a COW
prior
yet.
to the next meeting, just to let you look at that section 4. The rest of it is math, that it is what it is, and we've got to get this before levy admin at the county for their review. So.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilmember Riddle, please.
Just for clarity, we're starting based off of the resolution that we put together for last year's levy, correct?
Correct,
we're
and that's in your
starting from that
packet
as a-
tonight.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, the idea behind it is nothing has changed. The cuts that council made in the budget for 25-26 still are part of that budget, although you have, as you've seen tonight, had to amend out of those cuts because costs just keep escalating. Dates need to change. Anyway, the whereases where we call out the rate per thousand and the maximum rate, those need to change. The levy rate duration, those will change. So it's generally dates. The date that's called out for the election would need to change, but it is those types of edits that would be made. But we have it in the form that we need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Let me go around the horn before I
sure.
come back to you. Just want to check with our friends online, Mr. Muhlenberg or Mr. Rosenau, or I don't believe Councilmember Saunders is with us, but did you have any comments on the motion on the table, on the floor, excuse me? Floor table seems close at this point. Councilmember Rosenau.
I'll just do, I know you all have been through this before. I watched it from the audience, so just making sure I understand how things are going to go from here. So administration will draft a version, an update of what's in the packet. And we've given the levy amount, and so that sort of translates to the dollars and the total amount that it will be raised to. And then and then it just needs to get to the county in time to be in the ballots. And we got to make decisions about it as a community then. Are there other things that we should be thinking about in either now or in anticipation of this next meeting when we see that resolution that we haven't already talked to death?
Councilmember Riddle.
As far as for us, I don't anticipate we have any additional information. I know that there was, as City Minister Hill said, there was some requests to perhaps add some language to Section 4, the use of levy proceeds. So we'll see that when we see the resolution come before us next and vote on it at that time. There are other steps that need to happen. We have to get a pro and con committee and things of that nature. Administration is fully aware of how to make that work, but that's not involving us as council.
Take a pause for a second, please. Clerk McLean.
Just like Councilmember Riddle said, there is a pro and con committee that needs to be filed at the same time as we file the resolution that's due on August 5th, I think. And usually that takes time for me to advertise it for the pro and con committee. So I'm requesting that it pass by July 9th at the latest.
And I would offer, if you're considering this, council, that next meeting is the time to be moving forward if you're going to do this or not, because the amount of time it takes to get staff to get things sorted out is considerable, and we want to make sure that things are absolutely perfect, if you will. Director Vaughn.
So I'm going to say the full series of events is going to be that with the direction of a 22-cent levy. I'm just going to walk through all the steps, including from finance, from the clerk's standpoint, from the whole, basically what you can expect. So with the 22-cent direction, then it will come to me and I will do work and go through all of the math. That resolution will then be sent to, and I will partner with our assessor's office. And we make sure that resolution, in addition to partnering and making sure our city attorney Pratt, everybody has reviewed it before it comes to you to be completely adopted. So then once it's adopted, that's what triggers our clerk's releasing of the request for the pro and the con committee. That then, once it's approved, that gets filed by August 5th, or the early, basically in our minds, we just say by August, by August, the exact date. And so that will be filed with the county by that date, which then will also, we have always leaned on our attorney's office, a third party to write the explanatory statement as a very neutral statement of the city's ask. That then goes in to the voters pamphlet. I'm trying to think if I've missed a step. It's the pro and the con committee that gets to write a section that also goes into the voters pamphlet. And then this, each pro and con committee has a short amount of time to respond in so many characters to the other committee's argument or statements for or against. And then is there any step within that leaning to City Administrator Hill and that I may have missed? Because I do think there's one more thing to highlight.
He's waving.
I just wanted to ask, when is the election?
November 10th.
There we go.
That night.
I actually was gonna say it probably is important to note that once the city, and I'm going to lean to City Attorney Pratt to state this because it's going to carry more weight coming from our city attorney. But once, this is really important, that once the resolution is adopted, then I'm handing it to.
Well, then we don't do any pro or con persuasively at city council meetings. We only have factual information presented, and you went through that last time. A lot of people presenting factual information.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have some guardrails to share with you all. And the other thing I would say too, it's bittersweet for us, of course, because Director Vaughn is going on to a wonderful opportunity. We have limited service assistance, expert service from Director Vaughn. So pushing it into July, I think that you've had ample opportunity to decide one way or the other. If you come up with a number tonight, there's a number on the table. Hallelujah, that's great. But the final decision, I really would urge you to make it at the next meeting in 2 weeks, just for, thanks.
And just to clarify and make sure, of course, I have it right, the pro and con committee is independent.
Yes.
We do approve it, but it's really more of a formality because they are to be independent from us. But we do have like one vote there to authorize them to move forward and actually start writing the statements. Is that correct, clerk?
They submit application.
Yeah, we can submit applications directly to me, and then
We're getting a little bit outside of the scope of the motion on the floor.
You're asking for the full,
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
mainly independent from the council. The council's, I don't know why it's set up this way, but the council just approves it. I don't know why.
But that's the only other step we
yes,
know of.
Councilmember Rosenau, if it's within the spirit of the motion.
Yes, the question came up of when the election day is, and my calendar says November 3rd. I heard November 10th also, but my calendar says the 3rd.
It should be the second Thursday.
It's the second.
I believe it's
Tuesday,
10th.
Second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, it's the first Tuesday after a Monday, November.
After a Monday, yeah.
Maybe
That's okay. We'll get that sorted out.
We sort of-
Right now, you're talking about is the number
Yep.
and directing the administration to come up with the resolution that you can work with. Well, everybody's clear on that.
Is it still a hand or is it?
Josh, you still have your hat? I mean,
I'm
Councilmember-
sorry.
Yeah, you're all right. Thank you. Just want to make sure we stay focused. Yes.
Bringing us back to the number of 22 cents per $1,000. I want to emphasize that that's the number that we reached consensus on at the last Budget and Finance meeting. Taking a very data-driven approach with a spreadsheet and saying, well, what are our public safety expenses? What is our general fund balance? And then 22 cents was the number that kind of got us where we were looking to be at the end of 6 years.
Mhm.
So I think that is the appropriate number to send to the community to make a decision on.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goldman. I think also it's the number that shows that we are putting some of our funding into the balance as well. So it is a shared responsibility number. And I appreciate that council thought diligently about how we would try to limit the impact on the community by making sure that we're spending our saving funds as well to offset their the hurt of a tax increase, but it is necessary. And I think we've made a good compromise position.
Thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Furton.
And I want to compare and contrast, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wanted to compare and contrast my experience this afternoon with what we've done here, which is that I work for a public agency in which we are now beginning to talk about operational efficiencies and how that can help with a fiscal crisis that's going on. What's happening is that because that agency did not look far enough into the future, there are actual real job cuts occurring now and loss of services to clients. And I commend the administration on the steps that it took to avoid that situation. I believe it is true that we haven't had layoffs per se.
We have not. We're doing everything we can to increase efficiencies and economies. And if I may, just speaking to the question of public safety versus parks versus other things, the largest increases we've seen over a period of since the pandemic, ostensibly, have been in public safety arena. And there was a question that was posited by a citizen about whether or not if you choose to go forward with this and it failed, would there be cuts in public safety? That's splitting hairs, honestly, because positions as they become open would remain open. And that would be the first place we would start, unfortunately. Similarly, in other departments, as positions came open, there would also have to be some challenges there. I don't want to get into the negative here, but I think it's really important for everyone to recognize that this community deeply values public safety, and it is this largest portion of our general fund. And so it's a little difficult to navigate the narrative, if you will, whether it's public safety versus some other things. But I can assure you that in the past, when we've had shortfalls, when people have retired, then we have not filled those positions. We have a +3 at the department right now. Sadly, if we do not find a solution, whether it's a levy or some other situation here, in a very short period of time, we will not be filling the +3s. We will be allowing those to remain vacant because it's going to be necessary for our fiscal future.
And
Councilmember Good. You guys, thumb wrestle.
Arm wrestle. I'll be fast. No, I just wanted to point out that we were able to do more in-depth work because we had the spreadsheets available and some of the numbers in front of us that helped us to project out where the numbers would be in the future, where I don't think we necessarily had that in the same amount of context before. So that the data that we used is very helpful to make the decision that we need to make, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's very helpful. Yeah, Director Vaughn, you had a
I was
comment.
just going to circle back to the budget amendment of some of the areas that I kept referring to as housekeeping and that we're just exceeding what we budgeted. It's lean. We've been very lean since the pandemic. It's the leanest of lean. And so my just circling back that when you're seeing amendments that are, just operational, but we can't stay within those tight quarters. It's not because we're, not being fiscally responsible. It's that it's just simply too tight and costs go up. And so I'm just going to tie it back to that every single department has done their job of being very fiscally responsible. And through the budget process, it's just when the city has to keep having that conversation, it just shows how tight and lean that we have tightened the belt, and it just isn't possible to operate within those lean numbers. And so then it comes forward as budget amendments. And I just want to tie those two together. So.
Thank you. One other quick comment, just because I don't want Chief Zanella to panic. They're running, speaking of running lean, they're running incredibly lean. We have two officers out on medical leave right now and on light duty. And we have, as we've mentioned before, we have detectives jumping in to take shifts. It's an untenable situation, and we have to support our public safety. So, and the other thing I would also say is this council's done a fantastic job of making sure that their limited budget is staying. They've hardly spent anything. We cut my budget by 75%. I don't think I've spent anything. And that's hardly anything. And so on every front over the last 2 years, we have made sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's to be as efficient and responsible stewards of the public's money. And we can talk about comparisons with other cities next time, but this is even at 22 cents, this is a very, very responsible and very lean approach to our budget and structural deficit.
And if I may, as I've said before during these discussions, losing the staff that has that knowledge and getting leaner loses that institutional knowledge, and it just makes the system run slower. And so acknowledging that we want to keep the good people that we have that have that that have that history as much as we can, you know, and just knowing that we don't want to be the reason that they leave. We want to keep those folks because that's what actually makes it run lean and makes it run smooth. Without that, the cogs get clogged and it gets worse.
Let's go back to the motion on the table.
I just wanted to clarify that it was my mistake. Election day is November 3rd.
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a
Josh.
calendar of all the events, but
Yeah,
it got thrown off.
recesses back and forth. I mean, it moves back and forth. So it's early this year, actually. It means we can enjoy the rest of the month afterwards. And a little bit of time between Election Day and Veterans Day, right? Yeah. Okay. Motion on the table is to direct the administration to draft a resolution including 22 cents. Thank you both very much for all you do. Draft a resolution with the insertion of 22 cents per 1,000 for consideration of the levy lid lift from the dates of 2027 to 2032 to be brought back to the council at the next meeting for your consideration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Make sure I got everybody online. The ayes have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, council. This is a responsible thing for the future of our community. Really deeply appreciate it. We have punted the draft letter on item 9B, subject to further conversation. Council member reports. Councilmember Goldwyn, you want to talk about Seashore? Or?
I have 4 reports.
Ooh, oh, goodness.
But it's 9 o'clock, so I will try to be brief. I'll start with the tree board. The tree board met last week. We had a presentation from Public Works regarding the roundabout project. And I think there was really good collaboration between Public Works and the tree board. They got to weigh in on what species of tree they would like to see replanted as part of the canopy replacement in the roundabout area. So that was, I know the tree board was very appreciative of being part of that conversation. Next up, Seashore met last week. We heard from the Port of Seattle. The airport is going through their master plan, and that is currently open for public comment for the environmental impact statement. One of the things that I learned, it's while the airport is not directly relevant, when there is an environmental impact on a neighboring community and the airport provides the money to do that remediation, it is still up to the standards of the neighboring jurisdiction. So I thought that was relevant for, that might impact Lake Forest Park, not by the airport, but through other means. Third item, yesterday we had a meeting for the Racer Principals Assembly. Councilmember Saunders wasn't able to attend, so I went as alternate. Big picture, Racer is in good shape. They are relatively stable, both in terms of their budget, in terms of staffing. They have good integration with our local police departments, good integration with the Connections Crisis Facility in Kirkland. Overall, there weren't really any red flags that were raised. There are definitely opportunities for improvement. Some of them include just better integration between 911 and 988 systems, better transportation, better integration with the local emergency rooms, especially what's the name of the hospital in Kirkland? Evergreen Health.
Yeah.
But those are avenues that they're working on making those improvements. And then the last one, if you're wondering, if you're watching the video and why I look like a Swiss guard, today was the UW Chemistry Department's graduation, and so I came directly from that. And those are my updates.
We're gonna have a council costume night one of these days. Deputy Mayor Sheridan.
Yes, I just have one thing to report. The SCA Public Issues Committee met yesterday, and in fact, there's a couple of things to report there. One of them is that there's going to be an increase in solid waste fees charged by the county of about 8% for commercial haulers, which I believe Republic falls under. So we might see that reflected in our bills. So the SCA pick is, and sending this to the board, is basically sending a letter of concern to the county. One of the major causes of concern is that this is only a 1-year renewal. Generally, they're 2-year renewals, is my understanding, and so there's a little bit of predictability to price increases. But after next year, they're going to have to redraft this, so we don't know what that increase might potentially be. So that's a big concern. Secondly, a couple of our neighboring cities have announced that they are going out for various levies. Kenmore has a 36 cents per thousand levy for climate housing and human services. Shoreline is basically creating a parks district for the pool they are building. So that's about $100 million ask. And then finally, a problem that you didn't know we had. Redmond has put in an emergency resolution to a moratorium for commercial drone ports. As many of you know, commercial drones are regulated by the FAA, but the stuff on the ground, like the port, is actually land use, so that falls under the city. So the problem they're solving is all of a sudden there was a pizza joint in Redmond that was landing 5-foot wingspan drones on people's driveways and taking off from the parking lot outside the pizza joint. And that was something of a concern, a safety issue. So just basically putting it in our heads of our public safety as well as public works folks here.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. And on point, there was an article today about a gentleman in the Netherlands, I believe, who is selling pizzas from his 5th floor balcony and lowering them down by wicker basket. I think that the low-tech version is way better. And maybe we need to work on wicker basket landing zone moratoriums in our community. Colleagues, other comments or Councilmember Rosenau?
I covered some of this in the work session, so I don't need to go into depth on the Planning Commission meeting, but in addition to talking about affordability and missing middle housing, there was also the beginning of their work on updates to the critical areas ordinance that is a periodic update that we have to do anyway, and so a chance to just get any feedback and input onto that. So there wasn't, in a previous meeting, they had sort of gone through with staff what it actually looks like to review a project through that whole process, and this time was getting feedback and starting to gather the list of items that the staff and a consultant might have to update as as that unfolds. So no big decisions were made there, but starting to pull that list together. So if other folks out there have things to put into that hopper, it's the time to pass them along.
Thank you, council member. Appreciate that very much.
Oh, and also to add to Tracy's point, the Mountley Terrace is also doing a levy lid lift.
Yes.
So like all of our neighbors are doing them. It's the cool
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah, it's a tough time to be in the city business, so to speak. Colleagues, other comments, questions? Quickly, I'll make it very quick. First of all, I just want to say a huge shout out to my friends here on the dais and out there. Gosh, it's been it's a delight to work with you all. It really is. And you complement the staff so well. We have a great leadership team. And I know things are not easy sometimes, but I really, the civility and the thoughtfulness you guys bring to the table really means a lot to the community and to me. You know, me, Mr. Always trying to make middle child, trying to have people get along and be civil. And it really makes a difference in how we get things done. Seriously, how you get things done. And hats off to you. I can't thank you enough. Leaving it on a positive note, any of you who are fans of weather data, some of you may know I do have a weather station for about an hour more, maybe. My daughter has dubbed our resident eagle, who is destroying our weather station, Norbert. And I can't decide whether I need to take the weather station down or just let him go to town and chew it up. But if Lake Forest Park 40 is offline, it's because Norbert is chewing away on the. I'm just telling you.
That's the feel good stuff.
It's a good problem to have, honestly. Mr. Hill, do you have anything to bring to the table on the admin's report?
Wow, I have to follow that with something extremely not exciting, but just wanted to give council an update. The clerk's office has been receiving a lot of email regarding our new newsletter, negative email, that why, if you have problems with your revenue, are you spending so much on this wonderful new newsletter? Just want to put on the record that this newsletter actually costs us less than our last newsletter. We've taken some of the design in-house. And when I say we, that does not mean me. That means Matt and his staff. But I also want to address, because somebody will see this and say, but you added $10,000 to your newsletter in the budget amendment. That is to cover postage. So that increase would have happened regardless. So just so you know, we actually pay slightly less for this new and improved newsletter. So I hope you find it enjoyable. I think it looks a lot better than our previous newsletter. A lot more information in there, and you get a crossword puzzle. So there you go.
And on point, my friend Tim reached out and said he loved the new newsletter, and he was asking me what 6 down was, and I had no clue. So
call Matt, he knows.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah.
Yes.
On your way out the door today, as you look at the clearing up western sky, within a handspan should be Venus and Jupiter.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And also of note, it's still right. Is there the pride flag? Yeah, we have our pride flag up. If you did not notice, that's yay. Yeah, that's huge. Yes, Councilor Riddle.
And I just want to make a comment on the newsletter. I think communicating with our community, and they've always asked for more ways to learn about what we're doing, is really important. I think it's money well spent, because we only have so many ways that we can share information. So I really appreciate finding this way where we can share information with every resident in the city through this newsletter. So while it was an expense, I think it is a necessary expense so we keep the community appraised of what we're doing.
Thank you. And for those of you who are fans of the late Steve Jobs and his Apple presentations, and one more thing.
Two more things.
We're good.
2 more things. Yes, about the newsletter. I'm a big fan of the newsletter being mailed out, and it will. And for people that don't like it, there's going to be 4 people that do like it, and this will reach our residents that don't come to council meetings or that are in the corners of our city and are not as well informed. So hopefully we have more community engagement rather than less. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Furtado.
And to piggyback on Councilmember Good's outreach idea, I and Deputy Mayor Mork of Shoreline will be sitting at the plant sale for the Secret Gardens tour next Saturday between 11 and noon. So come on by. We'd love for you to bend us an ear.
And the Secret Garden Tour is from 9 to 3, so.
Right.
Right.
If they want to avoid you, they can come early.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry to be all over the place. It occurred to me, we did have a great event last weekend. Deputy Mayor Furtado was there. There was a parade of chess pieces.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, parade of chess pieces. I don't know how many of you got a chance to attend. One of our friends, Ross, who's retired, he led some teenagers in the restoration and the complete recreation of a number of the chess pieces from the giant chessboard from Third Place Commons. And it was, I think we've got video and all sorts of things from it. It was a really well-attended event and pretty special. And subsequently, they found out that there were additional chess pieces in the storage. They didn't actually have to recreate them, but now they have spares. So that's a very positive thing. So it was very special. And so many children over the last 30 years have memories, including my daughter, of picking up the pieces and walking around with them, usually in the middle of a game. In the case of my daughter, she picked up one of the pawns and walked off when she was about 2.5 years old. But it's really part of that sense of community that Third Place Commons brings to the mix, and if you haven't seen it, it's spectacular. It's really beautiful, and thanks to Celia and everybody at Third Place Commons, the board, for what they do for all of us. So.
And for more feel good, the first annual Listen Here Teen Band Showcase with Shore Lake Arts. I hadn't heard about this until it showed up in our city administrator report. So June 27th, 4 to 8 p.m. At Animal Acres Park, a concert for a dynamic showcase of emerging and developing teen bands from across Washington State. So get to see our new local talent and Washington talent.
All the band members are under 18.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for a great evening. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye all. Great seeing you.
Find out.
Good night, guys. Those of you who are online, you can hear us.